It's the time of the day for our keynote speaker to come on. Former London Assembly member, media commentator, host of Right Think and the Kurten Report on Australian National Review. And for the last 5 years, the leader of the Heritage Party. Please welcome David Kurten.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you so much also to Jason Barker, Isabel Vaughan-Spruce, Kate Shemirani, who have given fantastic speeches this morning. I know people want to serve lunch in a minute. We're just going to go on for 15, 20 minutes until we have lunch. We're a little bit behind schedule today, but I hope you don't mind listening to me for a little bit, talking about the Heritage Party, but I won't be too long. Because this is our 5th anniversary celebration. We've been going for 5 years. We launched in September 2020, just after that incredibly historic rally in Trafalgar Square that Kate and I were at, which I spoke about before she came on the stage. And people thought that we were going to be a flash in the pan, that we would just be here for a couple of months and disappear. But we're still here and we're still growing, we're still stronger than ever, and we're still leading the political debate in this country, because we're the only challenger party out there in the UK that has a full, coherent manifesto based on positive principles that we need to restore our nation. There are other challenger parties around, and some of them get media attention, some of them get more media attention than us, but they don't really know what they stand for, whereas we do. So we can have speakers that speak about being pro-life, and we need to make abortion unthinkable. We can have Kate who can, according to our principles, extend that and talk about what really needs to be spoken about at the moment, which is organ harvesting, which is something that is an absolute horror. And they're beginning to talk about it in America as well with RFK. And we need to talk about it in this country, and we need to make sure that it stops, because it goes against one of our fundamental principles, which is a culture of life. When we started out, that was just one of them. We had a manifesto with 11 sections. Our manifesto today is developed. We've got 27 sections in our manifesto now, so it's grown over the years. Our first manifesto only had 17 pages in it. Our manifesto now has got 62 pages, so it's nearly 4 times as long as when we started. But we started with positive principles, and the first of those was to defend our culture and our heritage, because our culture and heritage has been under attack for years, if not decades, if not a century or more. And I've spoken at length about cultural Marxism, which is the fundamental ideology behind the attack on our nation. And not just our nation, but all the nations in the Western world, Western civilization in general. And of course, as you know, Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. And in the Communist Manifesto, they advocate abolishing the nation, abolishing families, abolishing property, and also attacking and undermining Christianity, which is what our nation is founded on. So the principles that we have in the Heritage Party are Christian principles. We're not specifically a Christian. Oh, yeah, thank you. And we can only restore our nation if we understand that our nation is founded on Christianity and Christian principles. Our flag is made up of the St. George's Cross, the St. Andrew's Cross, and the St. Patrick's Cross. I wish there was a room for the St. David's Cross of Wales in there as well, which is the alternative flag of Wales, but there we go. We are a Christian nation with a Christian constitution and foundation. Now, of course, anyone can join the Heritage Party, but I think people of all faiths appreciate Christian principles, because some other of those first principles that we had in our very first Heritage Party manifesto that we still have today are traditional family values, national sovereignty, equality before the law, because our common law means that you should have an equal outcome before the law, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're left wing or right wing, black or white, male or female, or anything else. But we don't have that anymore. We have had developed over the last few years two-tier policing and two-tier justice. And this is something I know people are very, very concerned about. You see people now, especially under the Starmer regime, being picked up and arrested and jailed for social media posts. You have Isabel here just praying in her head on the street, and she's told that this is, someone could consider that harassment, and is picked up and arrested for praying in a Christian country on the public highway. Such things should not be. And with the Heritage Party, we should make sure that these things will never happen again. We need to dismantle those things, whether it's two-tier policing, two-tier justice, all the identity politics, and the whole raft of legislation which has led to freedom and our fundamental freedoms being undermined. We have digital ID coming in. You have, what's this woman, Liz Kendall, the other day, just saying that people would be punished if they didn't have digital ID. You might not be able to withdraw welfare or get your pensions. And I put out a tweet and said, well, she can stuff her digital ID where the sun doesn't shine. Because we don't want digital ID, because it is another thing that they have thought up to undermine our freedom. And it's being introduced on the basis that, well, we need this because we have a problem with uncontrolled illegal immigration. But uncontrolled, mass, rapid illegal immigration is being wholly facilitated by the government and by the previous government, and it has been for the last 25 years. It is a problem that they have created 100% because they want to undermine our identity as British or English, Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish. Now, I've got no problem with a small number of people migrating to the country who have got skills and who contribute to the country and want to come here and start businesses. I don't think anybody has. And before Tony Blair came to power, no one even spoke about migration. It was roughly zero. Sometimes it was a few thousand immigrating, sometimes it was a few thousand emigrating as well. But since Tony Blair's days, he introduced a program to bring this to fruition, that we would have more and more migrants. And they said, I think it was Alistair Campbell said, we're going to rub the right nose in diversity. Not because this was something that was going to benefit the nation, but just because they wanted to undermine what they call the right. And I've got no problem with being identified as on the right of politics, because these days about 90% of people are on the right. I'll say the far right. They all call us the far right, don't they? If you're anything right of Marx, you're on the far right. So that's where we are today. But what we are in the Heritage Party is just a party that has common sense values and principles that everybody accepted were normal 30 or 40 years ago and were not controversial in any way whatsoever. I mentioned traditional family values. We have a free market economy, self-sufficiency in skills, which goes along with having low immigration, because we have stopped training our young people to have the skills they need to do the jobs that need to be done. We're sending 50% of school leavers to universities to do courses which make them more stupid when they come out at the age of 21 than when they go in at the age of 18. But as well as doing that, we've undermined apprenticeships, and it's really hard to get training in a trade. People used to do apprenticeships and learn how to be mechanics and bricklayers and builders and gas fitters and plumbers. But now we rely on migrants to come into the country to do most of those jobs, because we're not training our own young people to do those jobs so that they can have a good living in their own country. How ridiculously stupid have successive governments been? And all we need to do is overturn that. We need to overturn that, thank you, and make sure that we're self-sufficient in skills again, so we don't need mass rapid immigration, because then we would be able to function as a country. And I think that also the other side of that is mass immigration of people who are skilled is detrimental to the countries that they come from. So you have politicians politicians of other parties sometimes talk about, we need to bring the best and brightest from all around the world to Britain. Well, I think we have the best and brightest here. We're just not training them, and we're just not supporting them as we should be doing. But if we take the best and brightest from Malawi and the Philippines and Sierra Leone, 79% of graduates from Sierra Leone come to the UK or the USA. But what's going to happen to Sierra Leone? They're not going to have any of their best and brightest to build their own countries, which means that Africa stays in a debt and slavery spiral. And that's absolutely wrong. So, you see, it all goes together. But we should be focused on this country and making sure that we make the best of the people who are here, and not just in terms of them being human resources, as British people who have this nation to enjoy as their birthright in a wonderful and beautiful nation which has been built by generations of our forefathers. And everyone should have the right to be, I don't like the word proud, I say proud to be British, but in the Bible, of course, pride is a sin. But I am grateful and I appreciate my nation and what is given to me, and I want to leave it in a better place for the people who come after me. And so this is why I'm doing what I'm doing here, leading the Heritage Party, and have done for the last 5 years. And this is why you're all here as well. And many of you are candidates and councillors and activists and campaigners and supporters. And even just being a member, you help everybody else by donating a little bit of money every year so that we can stand and we can fight and we can lead the country in the direction that it needs to be led. And so we might not have a lot of media exposure at the moment, but what we say does get picked up by other people and very, very quickly finds itself being spoken about in the mainstream media, even if they don't give us credit for it. And, you know, a couple of things that we mentioned this morning were really far out there on the fringe 5 years ago, suggesting that, well, we need to recognize this is a Christian country because we've had 50 years of cultural Marxism and secular humanism trying to destroy any connection with the past. But now there's a revival going on amongst the young people. People are turning back to God, people are turning back to Christ, people are going to the church, people are being interested again in our Christian heritage, which means that all the beautiful church buildings that we've got, which is wonderful, but people want to populate them as well, not just with buildings, but with actually a living faith, and turn back to God and Christ and Christianity, because people in the younger generation understand that's the only way that we can restore our nation. That's the only way back. 5 years on from when we started, it's acceptable to say that now, and people are talking about this more and more. And also being on the front of the pro-life debates, you know, people said, you shouldn't talk about that in the UK. We don't want to be like America. But people are now speaking about this, and people are people are realizing the horror of abortion which we have in this country. And we see wicked bills going through Parliament, such as the abortion amendments which were attached to the crime and policing bill. So we now have abortion up to birth with no consequence, because Matt Hancock brought in pills by post under the guise of the coronavirus pandemic. Oh, did I say pandemic? Okay. Forgive me. We also believe in financial responsibility. So a nation should not spend more than it receives. And every other party will say that they're going to cut the budget, or I only have a £10 billion black hole this year. Well, the truth is we have a £2.8 trillion black hole, which is almost inconceivable. It's very difficult for us to conceive of the difference between a million and a billion and a trillion, but it's a hell of a lot of money. And it's about £90,000 for every man, woman and child in the country if we had to pay it back. If someone called in all of our debts at once, we would be bankrupt just like that. We now have a debt to GDP ratio of 105%, and growing. It's growing at £180 billion a year, up from £150 billion last year. And it's all so unnecessary because this government, as plenty of other governments in the past, have been grossly financially irresponsible. They are spending £3 billion a year on aid to Ukraine and the Zelensky regime. Let's scrap that. They're spending £6 billion on migrant hotels. Let's scrap that. They're spending another £6 billion on foreign aid. Let's scrap that. £12 billion on welfare for foreign nationals, on top of the migrant hotels. We can scrap that. £10 billion a year on the HS2 project, which hasn't laid hardly a mile of track yet. Let's scrap that. £30 billion a year on the nonsense of wind turbines and solar panels, which don't produce any electricity when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. Let's scrap that. Something like £10 billion on NGOs and quangos, and many of the NGOs actually lobby the government to bring in more migration, more migrants, and to give money for solar panels and all of this net zero nonsense. They go into schools and they brainwash children in all of these things, that there's a climate emergency that they need to be scared of, and they also brainwash children into believing that this is not a good country. They tell our own children not to be proud of their own country. Well, let's scrap all of that. Not to mention the diversity office, which are infesting every single public institution that exists, from the universities to the police forces to the NHS and to every local authority you can think of. Let's scrap all the diversity, equality and inclusion officers, and so people can just get on with their jobs and be proud of their country. But while they're wasting all of this money, which adds up to collectively about £70 billion a year, which is half of the budget deficit, they are clawing back tiny little bits of money from people who really do not deserve to be attacked. And they are being financially attacked by the government, such as the farmers, by putting inheritance tax on family farms. They're getting £500 million from that, and they're spending 6 times as much money on killing Russians by giving it to the Zelensky regime. How evil is that? From this Starmer regime. And the fake conservatives beforehand weren't any better. They have put VAT on private school fees, which means that hundreds of them have shut down in a very, very short time, all to get £1.5 billion a year. Again, those two things together, less than what they give to Ukraine. They've put national insurance, extra national insurance on all businesses for employees' national insurance, which means that every business has an extra tax bill of about £800 per employee, and businesses, which are the backbone of our country, cannot afford this. Many small and medium-sized businesses have already gone to the wall because of this wicked Labour government. That's all to get £4.5 billion, which is less than what they spend every year on migrant hotels. So it's very, very easy to put this country right. We just need to be financially responsible. We need to support the family, because if you have good families, then people are less likely to commit crime, get into gangs, they'll have more stable relationships, they'll cost more money, they'll work harder, they'll have better careers, which means that there'll be more tax revenue for the government, and they need to make sure that they don't tax businesses and farmers out of existence, which means there's less money to spend on what we do want the government to spend things on, which is things like roads and protecting our nation. There's these things, I would say the police, but these days the police really aren't doing a very good job, because they are absolutely infested with diversity, equality and inclusion, and go after people for tweets while actually letting criminals walk free. And that's just another thing that needs to change. Well, look, I know you know all of these things, and you've heard them before from myself and other spokesmen at various times. Our new manifesto is fantastic, and you can go to the side of the room and you can pick up some printed summaries of our new manifesto, which other people are looking at, and they're copying, I know, word for word in some cases, because it's what we need to restore our nation and put things right again. So we want to get into power at every level. We're starting with the very most local level, parish and town councils. We have 10 parish and town councillors, and some of you are here today, which is fantastic. Next year there are scheduled elections in the Welsh Senedd, in the Scottish Parliament. I hear a yes over there, because some of our candidates for the Welsh Senedd are here today, and we're going to give all the other parties a run for their money. And one thing I know which is a particular interest and concern in Wales, as it is in the other parts of the UK, is the sexualisation of children in schools, with this subject called comprehensive sexuality education. I know Kim is going to come and speak to us later this afternoon about that and the latest of what's going on here. But how can we have parties that actually would even consider that it's the right thing to teach 4- and 5-year-olds about sexually explicit things, whether it's heterosexual or homosexual or transgenderism? No, when I grew up, you let kids be kids, you let children be children. And that's what we demand from everybody else in politics, to let kids be kids. And you don't put perversity on them, because that is absolutely disgusting, and anybody who does should be in a prison and not in a school. Or the Senedd, or Holyrood, or Westminster, or any local councils as well, which is why we're going to stand Heritage Party candidates everywhere we can in these elections coming up in 2026. So thank you so much, everyone, for being with me. Some of you have been here with me and with the Heritage Party from the beginning. Some of you joined this year, some of you joined in the intermediate years. But thank you all so much for your support. And we are a growing army which is going to restore our nation one way or the other. And we shall do it however long it takes, but I would prefer that it was sooner rather than later. Thank you so much, everyone.